What exists in the deepest underwater cave on Earth? Chapter 1. He is hanging in green-black water, 100 meters below the surface of a small forest pond in the Czech Republic. His headlamp cuts about 3 meters. Beyond that, nothing. Just cold, mineral-heavy water pressing against him and a thin white rope disappearing straight down into the dark. Below him is more than a kilometer of vertical water, deeper than most skyscrapers stacked end to end. This is the deepest known underwater cave on Earth, and nobody has ever seen the bottom. It was not carved by rain. Something is dissolving the planet from the inside. Think about that for a second. A hole in the ground so deep that every measurement we have of it is not really its depth. It is just how far our equipment could reach before it ran out. In 2016, a team led by Polish cave diver Krzysztof Stanowski sent a small remotely operated vehicle down into this place. It is called the Hranice Abyss. The robot went past 200 meters, then 300, then it hit 404 meters, and there the tether ran out. The cave, on camera, was still opening below. There was no floor in the frame, just more shaft, more dark, more of the same vertical passage disappearing into water the lights could not reach. A few years later, a geophysical survey used gravity measurements to estimate that the shaft might extend more than 1,200 meters below the water surface. That is over 4 Empire State Buildings stacked on top of each other, possibly deeper. And this is not a wide underwater room. It is a narrow vertical wound going straight down into the crust. In some places, the passage is only a few meters wide. It is not a cavern. It is a chimney. Picture that rope in your hand. Now picture it not being long enough. That is the story of Hranice. The depth record is not a record of the cave. It is a record of the limit of the machine we sent to find it. And here is where the story changes. Because everything you think you know about how caves form is about to become useless. Most caves are carved from above. Rainwater picks up carbon dioxide from the air and soil, becomes slightly acidic, and drips down through limestone. Over millions of years, it hollows out passages and underground rivers. That is the cave you learned about in school. That is Carlsbad. That is Mammoth Cave. That is almost every cave you have ever seen on a nature documentary. Water goes down, rock dissolves, passage forms. Hranice is not that cave. The math does not work. Water falling from above does not have enough energy or acidity to eat straight down into the earth for over a kilometer. It runs out of acid before it runs out of rock. It gets neutralized. It stops. The passages carved from above tend to spread sideways, following the water table, following gravity along the path of least resistance. They do not drill straight down for a mile. Something else is doing this, something that comes from below. Deep beneath the surface, warm mineral water is rising. It carries dissolved carbon dioxide from somewhere much deeper in the crust, possibly connected to old volcanic and tectonic activity in the region. The Czech Republic sits on top of geologically active zones that have been slowly leaking gas from deep in the earth for a very long time. When that gas-loaded water meets limestone, it becomes carbonic acid. And that acid is climbing. The cave is not being dug, it is being dissolved from underneath. Forget everything you thought a cave was. This is not a hole in the ground. It is a wound, a slow upward wound in the planet, opened by acid rising from below and reaching for the surface. What we see as the surface pond is not the top of the cave. It is where the wound finally broke through. That single reframe changes everything. If the acid is rising, the deepest part of this cave is not where the divers turned around. The deepest part is wherever that acid is coming from, and nobody knows how far down that is. Some estimates place the source of the CO2 several kilometers below the current explored limit. That is not a cave anymore. That is a channel connecting the surface to a process happening deep in the Earth's crust. Now think about the water itself. It is not clean mountain lake water. It is warm at strange depths, warmer than the surrounding groundwater has any right to be, loaded with dissolved minerals, slightly acidic. Divers describe the taste through their regulators as metallic and sharp, like sucking on a coin. Visibility collapses fast because of suspended particles kicked up by the rising currents. Thermoclines twist orientation. You can float in one layer of cold water and reach a hand into a warmer layer above it, and the boundary is so sharp you can see it shimmer. The divers here are not just fighting darkness and depth, they are fighting a body of water that is actively breaking down what it touches. The cave is chewing on the limestone right now in real time as you watch. Now imagine breathing inside something that is slowly eating stone, and it should be dead. That is the reasonable expectation. No sunlight, no plants, no photosynthesis. Take away the sun, take away the food chain. That has been the basic rule of biology for a long time. Every ecosystem class you ever took started with a leaf catching a photon. Take the photons away, and everything downstream is supposed to collapse. Down here, that rule breaks, because the rising acid water does not just eat rock, it also delivers energy, dissolved sulfur compounds, iron, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, chemical fuel that has been buried in the earth for a very long time and is now bubbling up through the wound, and there is life here that has learned how to eat it. On the walls of the cave, deep below any possible sunlight, thin films coat the stone. Microbial mats, bacteria that survive not by capturing photons, but by breaking chemical bonds in the minerals themselves. Sulfur oxidizing microbes take hydrogen sulfide and pull energy out of the reaction with oxygen dissolved in the water. Iron processing microbes do the same trick with iron compounds. These are ancient metabolic strategies. Some scientists think they might be older than photosynthesis. They might be closer to how life first started on Earth, back when the surface was hostile and the deep chemistry was the only reliable food supply, which means what we are looking at down there is not just a strange food chain. It may be a living echo of the earliest experiments life ever ran on this planet, still running, still working, still building bodies out of chemistry that has nothing to do with the sun. The base of the food chain here is not the sun, it is the acid. Down here, the poison is the pantry. Think about the strangeness of that. The very thing that is dissolving the cave, the acid that makes this water hostile, is also the reason there is life inside it. The wound feeds its own inhabitants. This is life without a sunrise, life that has never known a season, life for which the concept of day and night is meaningless. Some of these microbial communities may have been running the same slow chemistry for hundreds of thousands of years, quietly building their bodies out of what the earth is exhaling, and once you have microbes, the rest of the chain becomes possible. But this is where the second assumption breaks. Because if I told you there is a strange food chain deep in the darkest cave on Earth, your brain probably jumped somewhere specific. Big eyes, long teeth, some pale blind fish shape built for a horror movie. That is what caves are supposed to hide. Monsters. There are no monsters in Hranice. The residents are small, almost invisibly so. In the shallower zones where cave water mixes with surface influence, there are cave-adapted invertebrates known from the wider Moravian karst region. Blind amphipods, tiny crustaceans, ghostly things you would need a jar and a good light to even notice. Translucent bodies, reduced eyes, slow metabolisms, bodies stripped of anything a permanently dark, cold, food-scarce world does not require. Evolution here does not add features, it takes them away. Anything unnecessary is a cost, and this environment cannot afford costs. Biologists studying similar hypergenic, chemistry-fed cave systems around the world have found something consistent. The deeper the system, the smaller the survivor. Energy is scarce. Oxygen is scarce. A big body needs a lot of food, and there is not enough food here. Physics does not allow it. You cannot build a shark out of a chemistry gradient this thin, so the monsters of the deepest cave on Earth are the size of a grain of rice, and they are more impressive than any monster you could have imagined. To survive here, they had to give up almost everything. Sight, in most cases, color, speed, fat reserves, anything that does not directly help them get to the next meal, which might not come for a very long time. Some of these organisms can survive months without eating. Some slow their heart rate to a pace that would look like death in any surface animal. They are not dead. They are waiting. This is what a monster looks like when physics gets a vote. The image you had in your head at the start of this video of some fanged, pale creature waiting in the deep is a fantasy. The real inhabitants are microscopic mats and rice-sized invertebrates, quietly running one of the most extreme ecosystems on the planet. They are not scary, they are astonishing, because everything about their body says that survival, at its most stripped down, does not need spectacle. It needs patience and the right chemistry, and they may not even be the strangest thing down there, because we still have not talked about the human problem. The reason nobody has confirmed the bottom is not just because the cave is deep. It is because the descent itself, past a certain point, stops being something a human body can survive. That is where the story is about to get uncomfortable. Chapter 2. Here is what happens to a human body as it goes down. At 30 meters, nitrogen in the air you are breathing starts to dissolve into your blood at higher pressure. You feel a little drunk. It is called nitrogen narcosis, and it gets worse the deeper you go. At 60 meters on regular air, most people cannot think clearly. At 100 meters on regular air, they cannot function at all. Their judgment collapses. They forget procedures they have practiced hundreds of times, so technical divers switch to trimix, a blend of oxygen, nitrogen, and helium to reduce the narcotic load. Helium is a much smaller molecule and does not cause narcosis the same way, but helium creates its own problem. Past about 150 meters, the nervous system starts to tremble, muscles twitch, vision distorts. Divers describe it as their body arguing with itself or as the sensation of vibrating from the inside out. This is high-pressure nervous syndrome. There is no gear that fully solves it. You can slow the descent to give the body time to adjust, but slowing the descent extends the dive, and extending the dive creates the next problem, because then there is oxygen. The gas that keeps you alive at the surface becomes toxic under pressure. Breathe too much of it too deep, and it triggers convulsions. Underwater, a convulsion means the regulator falls out. It means drowning. Divers have to precisely calculate the mix of gases they breathe at every depth, switching to different tanks at different levels, because the same gas that saves them at one depth will kill them at another. Every meter down doubles what your body has to survive on the way back up. A dive to 200 meters can require days of decompression. Divers ascend one slow step at a time, stopping for hours in the cold water, letting the dissolved gases work their way out of their tissues, rush it, and bubbles form inside the blood vessels. That is the bends. It can kill within minutes or leave permanent damage to the brain and spinal cord. Krzysztof Stanowski, the diver who has done more descents into Hranice than almost anyone alive, reached around 200 meters on human dives. He is one of the most experienced people in the world at this. He trained for years, went through every safety procedure, prepared every gas mix with obsessive care. And even for him, the cave is a place a person can visit for a few minutes before biology forces them to leave. The cave does not stop us. Our own body does. That is the part almost nobody expects. Not the darkness, not the cold, not the acid. The ceiling on this cave for a human is the chemistry of our own blood. So we sent the machines. In 2016, working with support from National Geographic, Stanowski's team deployed a tethered ROV. It carried lights, cameras, sensors. It could handle pressure that would crush a human easily. It did not care about narcosis or decompression. It was built for exactly this kind of job. And at 404 meters, its tether ran out. The cave, on camera, was still opening. A robot purpose-built to explore the deepest places on Earth, and it did not fail because the cave stopped. It failed because we did not bring enough rope. It stared into a passage that kept going, and it had to be pulled back up. The last footage from that expedition shows nothing but black water below the lights, with the rock walls of the shaft still visible on the sides, still narrowing downward, still going. The robot ran out of rope. The cave did not run out of depth. Somewhere below that number, the story continues without witnesses. There are no photographs of it, no sonar map, no confirmation that a bottom exists at all in any meaningful sense. The estimate of 1,200 meters comes from indirect measurement, analyzing tiny variations in the Earth's gravity above the cave to model what must be underneath. It is a good estimate. It is the best we have, but nobody has ever seen it. And this is where the scale of the mystery starts to expand, because the cave itself is not the whole system. It is just the part we can see. Look at a geological map of the region around Hranice. The whole area is a network of faults, cracks, and rising warm springs. Mineral-rich water bubbles up in several places nearby. There are other pools, other places where the Earth is quietly leaking chemistry from below. All of them are connected to the same deep source, the same slow exhale from somewhere in the crust. The abyss is not one hole. It is the visible mouth of a system that reaches far beyond it. The cave is a window, not the room. Think about that. What we call the bottom of the deepest cave on Earth might just be a doorway into passages and chambers that spread through the deep rock in directions we cannot map. The vertical shaft we can measure might connect at its base to horizontal networks, to other flooded chambers, to a whole three-dimensional plumbing system carved by the same rising acid over millions of years. We are not exploring a cave. We are looking through a keyhole at something much larger. And here is another reframe. You probably think of caves as ancient, something formed millions of years ago and now just sitting there, waiting for tourists. That is not true for this one. Hranice is still being carved, right now, as you watch this. The acid is still rising, the limestone is still dissolving, the wound is still opening, slowly, by human standards, fast by geological ones. Every year, molecule by molecule, more of the surrounding rock is being taken into the water and carried away. The dissolved calcium and other minerals eventually reach the surface, where some of them precipitate out in the spring water that flows out of the region. If you walked the area, you would see traces of it in the deposits around the warm springs. The cave is being processed and shipped upward, one atom at a time. It is not a monument, it is a wound that is still opening. The depth of the cave right now is not the depth it will have in 1,000 years, or 10,000. The bottom, wherever it is moving deeper. The system has direction, it has momentum. The passages that Stanowski's ROV filmed in 2016 are already, in some tiny measurable way, different from the ones a future ROV will film in 2116. And this is where a callback returns with a stranger meaning. Remember those microbial mats on the walls, the bacteria surviving on sulfur and iron? For a long time, they were treated as passengers, small residents of a place that chemistry built for them. Research on similar hypergenic cave systems around the world suggests something different. The microbes may not just live in the cave, they may be helping to dig it. Sulfur-oxidizing bacteria produce sulfuric acid as a byproduct of their metabolism. Sulfuric acid is one of the most aggressive natural rock dissolvers there is, and it is produced right at the surface of the microbe, right against the wall of the cave. That acid, right where the microbe is sitting, attacks limestone even faster than the carbonic acid alone. Mats build up on the walls, and under those mats, the rock dissolves quicker than it does on bare surfaces. In some cave systems, biologists have measured dissolution rates that are impossible to explain by chemistry alone. Something is speeding it up. That something is life. The wound has help. The smallest things down there are the ones building the biggest hole on Earth. That is the shape of the story. A place that looks like emptiness is actually a construction site. A place that looks dead is actually being built by life you would need a microscope to see. The base of the food chain is also the workforce. The organisms eating the chemistry are the same ones deepening the cave that channels the chemistry to them. They are digging their own home. Now the story gets uncomfortable, because there is a reason we know as much as we do about Hranice. Divers have gone in, and not all of them have come out. Cave diving is one of the deadliest recreational activities on Earth, not because caves are inherently violent, but because the human body is not built for the environments cave divers enter. In deep flooded caves around the world, there is a long history of accidents, equipment failures, disorientation in low visibility, miscalculated gas supply, losing the guideline, panic under pressure. Each of these can be fatal within minutes, and in a place like Hranice, where the walls are narrow and the water is cloudy, and the depth punishes every mistake exponentially, there is no such thing as a minor error. The community that dives these places is small. They know each other. They train together. They know the ones who did not come back. The ones who survived the deep descents describe something similar. Not a sound, not a sight. Just a sense of the place. A feeling that being that far from the surface, in water that is chemically strange and geologically active and swallowing your lights within a few meters, makes the human brain start reaching for meaning where there is no meaning to be found. Some divers report a sensation of being watched. Others describe the water itself as feeling heavy in a way that goes beyond pressure. It is not real. It is the nervous system running out of familiar reference points and inventing new ones. The cave is not aware. It is limestone and acid and microbes and darkness. But standing at 200 meters, with a tether above you and pure black below you, the difference between a place that is watching and a place that is simply this indifferent stops mattering. It does not need to be alive to feel alive. And now, after all of this, look up, come back to the surface. The pond that sits over the top of the Hranice Abyss is small, maybe the size of a large swimming pool, greenish, slightly murky, surrounded by trees and moss-covered cliffs in a nature reserve in eastern Czech Republic. There is a wooden walkway. Tourists come to look at it. Families take pictures. Children lean over the railings. Most of them do not fully understand what they are looking at. They are looking at the lid. Below that calm green surface, going straight down, is the deepest known continental hole filled with water anywhere on the planet. A vertical shaft over a kilometer deep by the most reasonable estimates, possibly deeper, being carved right now by rising acid, coated in microbial life that eats stone, threaded with tiny blind survivors, explored only to a fraction of its length, its true bottom, if it has one, still unknown. And from above, it looks like a small forest pond. The deepest place on Earth's continents is disguised as a puddle. There is something almost funny about that. The most extreme underground environment on the planet is not hidden behind a dramatic entrance. It does not sit under a volcano or at the bottom of an ocean trench. It sits under a wooden walkway in a quiet forest in Central Europe, next to a parking lot, marked by a small plaque. The scale of what is happening below is so far beyond what the surface suggests that the two do not seem connected. But they are. Everything that happens down there over enough time changes what is up here. And now, come back to the diver. He is still there, hanging on that thin white rope at 100 meters. Cold water, mineral taste through the regulator, headlamp cutting a small cone into black. Below him is everything we just talked about, the vertical wound, the rising acid, the microbial mats building the shaft as they feed on it, the rice-sized survivors somewhere in the shallower zones, the empty, unwitnessed passages below 404 meters, the doorway to a system that might extend into rock we will never see. He is not descending into a cave. He is hovering above an open question that goes down farther than any human has ever confirmed. He will not reach the bottom today. Neither will the next diver. Neither will the next machine. Not the one after that either. Somewhere below him, in total darkness, a microbe is oxidizing a sulfur compound and releasing a molecule of acid that will loosen another grain of limestone. Somewhere below that microbe, another one is doing the same thing. And somewhere below all of them, warm gas-loaded water is still rising from a source we cannot map, feeding the process that has been running for longer than our species has existed. The wound is still opening. The bottom, wherever it is 1 grain deeper than it was this morning, and by tomorrow it will be deeper still. He hangs there for another minute, then he starts the long, slow climb back up. The rope ends. The cave does not.